Cool. 3, 2, 1. There we go. So, hi, people of the internet. Welcome to this second virtual meetup, virtual AklGameDev Meetup. I'm joined by Saf Davidson, Demi Schanzel, Casey Lucas-Keed, and Mads McKenzie. The topic for this meetup would be being out in games. So it's all about being part of a very colorful, diverse group of people in the industry, and I'd like to hear one of your all of your stories. So who's keen to share first?
We're asking for a volunteer, a sacrificial lamb. I guess I'll go ahead and start since I opened my mouth first for my sins. So, hello everyone. My name is Casey Lucas Quaid, and I am currently the community manager at Dinosaur Polo Club, based on here in Wellington. So I'm working on Mini Motorways and Mini Metro at the moment. And prior to that, I had do some math. I had a 9.5-year stint working on Armageddon Mud as a kind of catch-all area and object designer, as well as doing narrative and player request type stuff. And I also write flavor text for Magic the Gathering.
Ooh.
Whoa. That's incredible.
He is too cool for us.
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm thinking about what I do. Okay, so I'm Saf. I'm a narrative designer and writer and an editor and a podcaster. I am currently working on, well, last year I edited for This Too Shall Pass, which was a game made in New Zealand, and I also wrote for Before We Leave, another New Zealand game. I'm also doing some more writing for Before We Leave this year, and I'm also currently working with NetSpeak Games on a mobile game, which is not a New Zealand company. But yeah, so I'm working with them.
Nice.
Yeah. I feel like I have another thing. Oh, I'm also editing on Necro Barista.
Necro Barista?
Yeah, it's a Melbourne-based game.
Ah.
Both made in Melbourne and set in Melbourne.
Yeah, it's Route 59 that makes that one, right?
Yeah. Wow, you went... Route. I love it.
Is it route or root?
It's root. Well,
oh no.
It's regional.
Oh,
it's
no.
regional. It's
Oh,
okay.
No. Yeah, of course.
We're not supposed to
Regional
talk
like
about
postcodes.
rooting like this soon into the panel, guys.
I really need to know.
My bad.
I'll go next. So I'm Mads, and I do sort of my own very independent game dev stuff. So I've made 2 games so far, Invest Nights and Catacomb Prince. I don't have a formal sort of studio that I'm in. I just kind of do stuff. And I'm working on a 3rd title at the moment. And then, in addition to that, I also do game studies academically. I'm currently doing my PhD, and those are kind of the 2 sides of games that I'm involved in.
Okay.
Wow.
Last but not least.
I guess I'm Demi. I'm sort of a game design academic at the moment. Sort of looking at the intersection of social networks and game design. And how you sort of apply behavioral science between the two of those. Yeah. It's pretty small and quiet at the moment for me. So.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Cool.
Oh, by the way, I'm just browsing the Twitch chat at the moment.
Yeah.
Someone's mentioning there's a microphone just huge amount of backgrounds.
Might it be...
Because I can't hear it, I assume it's me. My setup's
might
pretty
it
low
be-
quality. I can't hear it.
I can't hear any.
Oh,
Neither
okay,
can
yeah,
I.
that's
I can't
good.
hear any background noise at all.
Oh, that's really
No.
I wonder if it might be
like a
no,
Twitch
because like
thing, maybe?
the motorbike guy has wandered off. So yeah.
Yeah.
Could be. Could be.
Okay.
If you hear birds chirping, let me know because that one is me and I can fix that.
Cicadas are definitely me, but I refuse
Oh,
to
yeah.
fix it.
I've got a whole bunch of cicadas outside at the moment.
Yeah, same. But yeah, so the first question for the panel would be, what's it like being a queer developer in the gaming industry? Is it did it help with your did it help with your creativity when it comes to expressing yourself, or is there something more to it?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna briefly mute myself because there's a guy cranking a roller door open in the background of
I can
my
hear it. It's
sound
amazing.
now. Just having. All right, so I'm just gonna listen to you folks for a moment.
Hmm.
I can hear birds
Oh, wait.
chirping as well, which is really nice.
Hmm.
Digital birds.
I think it was Saf.
Sorry, what was the question again? I got completely sidetracked.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got distracted by
um,
food happening.
What's it like being a queer developer? Did it help with your creativity when it comes to developing your games, or?
Yeah. I think I'll go first since no one else is. I mean, I wouldn't say it necessarily has helped my creativity, not in that sense of the word. But I think everything I do is very much inspired by it, you know. Even though I traditionally don't make a lot of very queer-centric games, they're all very sort of queer inclusive, I suppose, or just allow people to express themselves in a very sort of natural and sort of intimate way.
Okay.
I think that it's kind of like a question with two sides because you've got like the way that it influences practice and then also the way that it sort of influences how we relate to the gaming industry like as an industry. Because you've kind of got like in both respects like upsides and downsides. Because creatively you know, you at least get the luxury of knowing that like you're doing something a bit different, even just by virtue of your perspective, from like a lot of the people who traditionally ran like game development and who did all of the sort of foundational stuff in the medium. But then the flip side of that is that like sometimes you have to work harder to convince people of the worth of what you're doing, and the same sort of like duality of that plays out socially. Like you get access to sort of circles of people within like that smaller like queer game dev circle who are really great and amazing, but then also sometimes you have to deal with like the social downsides of especially being like an out queer person and all of the usual stuff that like has sort of consequences for in day-to-day life. So
Okay.
Yeah, like
I think my
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. I think I'm kind of like and being queer, I don't think has really like influenced my creativity or anything. But everything I make is inherently queer in some way, just because I don't know how else to exist. Like I don't know how to make things not queer. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, being queer in game dev can be kind of nice because there's a lot of people to be friends with. Like most of my friends are queer game developers. I think it's a place that some of us kind of gravitate towards because it in itself isn't really a structured industry in a lot of other ways that others are. It's a bit more creative and experimental, so you can find really good people there. But at the same time, they're also like very corporate, very like normative people, and those people can be annoying if you're working with them, and you like can often clash over ideas of like making a character queer, even like a side character, like that can really from the top they'll be like, you can't do that because audiences won't want that. And so within studios there's a lot of fighting up with that kind of stuff. As far as the community goes, I haven't personally experienced anything like awful just within working on games.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely think that as a community manager, as a person who is currently in a position where I am in an outward-facing role, interacting with a large chunk of our player base online in real time and in more like player support type of scenarios, it is kind of to an extent painting a very easy target on your back in that people who are already upset with you will then have like this one thing that they can use to just really zero in on you, and they can it gives bad actors an opportunity to make things personal very quickly. But I am also a woman, so I'm used to that, I guess, which is a bad thing to say, but at the same time, you know, growing up in a lot of male-dominated industries, I've also worked in manga, comics, sports journalism, fields that traditionally are pretty tough to hack it in and hang around in if you are at all queer or gender diverse. And it's just something that you kind of have to keep in mind when you're interacting with people in certain ways, where it's like, I've never really had anyone kind of come for me like, we heard there was a gay person working at Dinosaur Polo Club, like, let's get him. Like, that doesn't happen. But at the same time, if people are already upset with you, it's just sort of like one more arrow in the quiver, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely been used against people, like people who've managed to get like a target paint on them by a community. Like, they will definitely use that against them.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
No, definitely. I think the dichotomy between like game designers and that community and gamers, the people actually playing the games, is like, there's a massive divide between that. I've definitely sort of come on the wrong side of like, I don't know, every so often you'll receive comments by someone playing your game. It's particularly nasty and surreal.
True. Especially if
but I think, but yeah, I think my personal experience, especially within the game industry itself, has been largely positive.
Okay.
Yeah, anything I think of that I could be like, oh, that was because I was gay. I could also be like, oh, it's because I was a woman. So it's kind of hard to pry those two things apart when it comes to discrimination in the industry.
Yeah, like when you're first starting out too, a lot of it is just like, is it because of some aspect of myself that I have received the reaction that I am receiving, or did I just actually do something stupid or make a social faux pas? Like, that's another layer.
Yeah.
When you're just starting out, where you just have to kind of go, like there's a chance this is my fault, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that one of the aspects of being a queer person trying to break into an industry like this is that you actually, even if it's only in your own head, you kind of feel like you'll get fewer chances to make those mistakes. Like if you screw up once, it's going to reflect badly on your whole community, or if you make one mistake or decide not to work with someone or perform poorly on a project, like it might be tougher to get another chance. And I'm not sure how much of that is just that sort of ingrained feeling of not not necessarily growing up in environments where we are told from birth, like, oh, relax, you can get a million chances. It's okay if you screw up, like there's definitely a level of I don't know. I think there's a level of trying to think of what the right term. I don't quite want to say like self-criticism, but in my experience, it feels like queer people in creative industries are often harder on ourselves than our, much more cis, much more straight, much more white, much more doodly counterparts are.
Yeah, I agree. I think anyone of minority kind of has that in game dev in particular. It's, I don't know, possibly because it feels so visible. It's a very small industry. Like it's a big industry obviously, but also it's really small in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, and in New Zealand it's like even smaller. It's
so small.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just like one big dorm,
I can't believe we
Yeah, it
managed
really
to
does
get
feel that way.
It does feel like
the
a
whole
dorm.
New Zealand games industry into this one call. We've got all five of us.
This is all of us.
Yeah.
There aren't any
It's
others.
5 people.
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think relative to my experience in other industries, especially sort of corporate or sort of entrepreneurial, I think the game development scene is a lot more accepting of queerness.
It is.
Especially those other spaces which are very white and very heteronormative and often very male. Like, you immediately feel very different, like right off the bat. And it can be quite hard to fit into that sort of culture. And I think it still does happen in game dev, but I think it becomes harder to talk about because it is more normalized. Almost to the point where it's easier to sort of, how do I put this, I guess? Because it's so much harder to sort of break into these corporate or entrepreneurial sort of spaces, it's harder to talk about these things in game dev because people just sort of naturally assume that we've figured it out, that it's a solved problem, that there's, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm sort of struggling for words at the moment.
I think the relationship between game dev and other industries is really interesting in that regard, because there was like a study from one of the big sort of game development organizations of the UK, I think like early last year, which basically came up with the stats that queer people are represented twice as much in the games industry as they are in the normal populace.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so
Wow.
it's like this weird thing where relative to anywhere else there are a lot of us. However, that doesn't like mean that every single problem magically goes away just because we have like 4% trans people instead of 1% trans people, or like 25 to 30% gay and bi people instead of 5 to 10%. So it's one of those things where like you get to be part of a larger minority group, but you continue to be a minority group.
Oh yeah, it's really.
Yeah, like I said, like it doesn't really like fighting to get queer stuff in games if it's part of a bigger studio is still a big fight. Like it's ridiculous, like, but it's like that. It actually is. And I know that like representation inside of things isn't the biggest battle. It's also having the people in it and keeping them in it. I think one of the biggest struggles with it is that like a lot of the people up top, like the higher up people, tend to be still white straight dudes. And so that kind of still comes down.
Yeah, and I think that also one of the aspects of working in games that can kind of tangle into issues that you will experience as a queer person, and especially as a trans person, are that there's the situation where you end up these perma contractors or part-time jobs that don't confer any benefits, and especially if you are living and working in a country where like anything from therapy to HRT to like gender affirming surgery is something that is going to be gate kept from you for capitalistic reasons. And game dev being an industry full of casual work and freelancing, it does actually mean that while there might be more queer representation, you're ending up in situations where like more of your queer staff are actually living in financial and medical precarity, which sucks.
I've seen that to a lot of my friends.
Yeah.
Also myself, I guess.
But yeah, that kind of circles back into the question of how can we, or what's the best course of action when it comes to maintaining that representation, as well as not really fighting against the higher ups, but more of just trying to make it clear that there should be more representation, or just something more than just what is being seen on the media when it comes to games or other industries that have struggled with representation, or
I would really be keen to hear what Mads and Demi might have to say about that, just because you guys are the ones that have actually been doing way more like comparative media study than I am, so you might have some insights into some other fields or something. I'm really curious.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, my research doesn't go in that direction.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I think creative fields are most challenged by this in a way, like because any sort of creative project, whether it's a game or a film or a book or otherwise, is so personal to the people making it that in this studio run mostly by sort of, for example, sort of white male people, they're just going to naturally be more inclined to just tell the stories they know, and just sort of push out any other story that differs from theirs. So I think for representation of sort of queerness in games or similar, it'd be really lovely if we had more studios that were sort of run and headed by queer people in general.
Yeah, studios that are run by more diverse standards, but like I'm always wary of any studio that advertises itself as like a queer ally or anything, because it's very easy to hide behind allyship.
No, I'm not talking about allyship in this sense, but yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a very different story.
I think that also one of the benefits and one of the tricky things about like representation in games themselves rather than like game staffing is that games have this great opportunity in that like you have it, it's not a finite experience like it is with TV and movies. Like you don't have to, put everything directly in frame and like say like this is the amount of screen time we're devoting to like the gay couple. You can just be like, they're a side quest over here, but as a result games are able to skate by on like having a lot that's in there but also pushing it to the margins and being like, yeah, we've covered off this representation because it's in a side quest. Well, like, yeah, like a couple of people in your party are bi, but only if you romance them. And so and so as a result, I think like one of the things that we should be pushing forward more on now is having more sort of like non-optional queer stuff. So more games that like try and make sure that those elements are, in the main quest, or like sort of compulsory elements of the character that don't turn into like player sexuality and that sort of thing. And then on the staffing side, I agree with everyone else that like it's just a matter of having more queer people in positions of power, and ideally like queer people who have some interest in keeping the proverbial ladder down rather than rolling it up behind them, because like there are definitely some prominent people around who are queer, but they're not necessarily people who want to like try and like help others into greater positions or keep them sticking around in the industry. So like having more people who actually have the interests of the community at heart in those positions would be really great.
I think as well, if you're looking at it from like what can gamers, I guess, do is like there's a lot of indie content that has queer stuff in it, like a lot more queer stuff in indie, obviously, because they can experiment more. Like finding those games, looking for the smaller games, playing them, and like giving them your money, but also giving them feedback is always really important and vital for helping those games stick around. And also, like the more successful that kind of stuff is, the more it filters back into AAA generally. Not always, but sometimes. But another thing as well is like when games do like queer stuff that you like, it's worth like giving it a review for it or telling other people to get it as well, because the big companies unfortunately listen to money a lot and also what the audience want, and the people who don't want that stuff they're very loud about it. So yeah.
Additionally, like even if you're not at a big company, like my third game that I'm working on at the moment, I've been trying to get funds for it, and one of the things that they immediately ask when you go looking for funds is like, how many downloads did your last game get, what were the reviews like, or those sorts of like numerical things. So just from a standpoint of like, you know, go on itch or Steam or whatever and leave the thumbs up rating, just like clicking an additional button so that when they have to show up with that spreadsheet that says like, this is how many people like the thing, this is how many people downloaded the thing, doesn't matter if you actually played it or not. Just giving people those stats can actually be really helpful, especially in terms of like people who are here in the early stages sticking around to do like bigger stuff later on.
Yeah, because it's kind of the situation that minorities are working with in any sort of commercial media industry is that like you have to convince the world that aspects of your identity are a viable product, and that's fucked up, but like it's how it is, you know. And
it's like, well, what's the point of them being why are they queer? Why aren't they straight? Why are you making it different, man? Like, why we shouldn't answer that question to begin with.
And the other thing that gets kind of interesting with like queer games in particular, so I think like of us here, I'm the one who makes the sort of most overtly queer games. Like most of mine are gay dating sims. So that's kind of
all of my queer stuff is in my not games work. Yeah.
So
I'm doing my best with Mini Motorways, man, but there's no people in it. Like,
try harder with the cars.
It's those fake brains.
I know that you can do something with the cars.
You're doing the best you can, I'm sure.
Yeah, like the reality is that every train in Mini Metro is actually headed to different gay clubs. Like that's the secret subtext.
Hey.
I knew it.
But yeah, so like as a queer developer, like some of the stuff that you have to do to try and make your games seem like viable products gets like kind of weird, because like romance is one of the ways that you can kind of make it saleable, but then you have to like specifically try and be mercenary about the romance, so it's like as appealing to the people who are likely to pay money for it as possible, and so you have to really figure out the best way to like commercialize your identity and the identities of your characters. So yeah, it can be like very sort of cynical when you're doing all the sort of like budgeting and planning for that type of thing.
True. It is kind of interesting in how it is more like making it as a viable product.
Yep, that's capitalism.
Yeah, it sure is. No, I think, yeah. I think for a lot of more sort of, you know, monetization orientated companies, like queerness is still a political risk that they're not willing to take in any sort of way, unfortunately. Especially for companies targeting, you know, wider or international audiences that I'm not necessarily going to be kind to that, you know.
True.
And so that does become like a really hard fight to make. And from a monetization perspective, it's true, there's not really, from a purely capitalist or monetization perspective, there's not really a good argument for it in that sense. Well, I don't know, because there's been a lot of really incredible cases over the last few years that actually indicate the opposite of that.
Yeah, like in reality,
but,
people do want the queer content.
No, exactly. Yeah.
I think
they're
that,
bad. One thing, they're bad at like advertising it, but also making good queer content.
Yeah.
I think that like the classic example of that is, you know, the exclusive game moment phenomenon in movies, where Hollywood movies will put in like 5-second clips that you can cut out of like the Chinese release or whatever.
Yeah, looking directly at the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, or like I still love the Beauty and the Beast live action example of it, which is why I continually call it the exclusive game moment, because, you know, who didn't want to see LeFou dance with a guy for 5 seconds? It's what we were all waiting all this time for. Finally, progress. But I think that like the equivalent of that in games is like, you know, the 5-second side quest character in an RPG, so you can tick the box and say like, yay, we did it, we were friendly to gays. But not too much. We have to make sure that it's like not going to be too in your face for the people who disagree with it, and so it's just like this, the whole thing of like trying to please everyone and as a result pleasing no one, basically, because people still get mad about that stuff, and on like both sides, whether it's, you know, too little of it or people who think that's too much. And yeah, so
yeah, and the other problem too is that sometimes along with like those little snippets, is you'll end up in situations where a developer will insert some queer content into their game without consulting any actual queer people. They'll do it in a really awful, ham-handed way that either makes the character a horrible stereotype or ends up inadvertently saying some nasty things, or ends up repeating some nasty things because they think that's just how queer people are, because they've never spoken to one in their lives. And then their regular audience gets mad at them for including the queer content, and then their queer audience goes, dude, what the fuck? And like they end up in a situation where they're like, see, we should never do this again. Remember how it worked out last time? And
that happens really often. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of representation, just out of curiosity, what's the most sneakiest example you've done to represent the community in your games? And
I mean,
Mads, have you ever even done anything sneaky?
I haven't done anything sneaky, actually. I just kind of show up with a bunch of gays and go like, yeah, gay community, you're the only people playing this stuff, so like, what does it matter?
I know before we leave, I made at least a couple characters, I think, non-binary. At least one character, one of like the core characters. Like, it's pretty, because in the chapters I wrote, they're like quite short and quite like the main characters are quite ambiguous because you don't stay with them for very long. But I'm pretty sure I managed to make one of them non-binary, or at least one of the characters in the area. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Because I remember having a conversation about the genders, and I was like, it doesn't matter if they're gendered. Like, this isn't space.
Space quiz in a strategy game? That sounds wonderful.
That's all I wanted.
Sucks, because I have a great example, but I can't talk about it yet.
Oh, you finally made some gay trains?
Oh, I'm so excited.
Oh yeah,
you
found me. Yeah, you found me. Yeah, it's the gay trains. No, I've been there is another big non-Wizards of the Coast IP that I've been having some negotiations with, that no contract signed yet, but I'm in the deep in the reeds of pitching stage. And one of the things that I have pretty much overtly stated about the outline of the project that I've sent them is that despite the fact that it is not a franchise that is well known for queer representation, it's not unheard of. And I would like to explore a little bit more of that. But it's tough to do because it's one of those stories where like everyone involved is probably gonna die horribly, and I don't want it to be like bury your gays, but it's like relax, we're burying everyone. You know, it's very equal opportunity. Yeah,
Halo totally is an issue because it's got two lesbians who aren't even like they're not dating each other lesbians, they're separate lesbians in one story.
Separate lesbians? Are you allowed to do that?
Yeah, they both die, but I'm like, whenever I tell people about that, I'm like, to be fair, this is Halo, and everyone died. Like, it would stand out if they both lived, kind of.
Yeah, that's sort of the thing that I am talking about. That's exactly how it would be. It would be like, if I somehow rewrote the ending so that even one character lived, I think every single person reading it would be like, this is the cheapest bullshit I've ever seen. Like, you were just not willing to kill that character off because you thought he was too cool. And yeah, it's very much telegraphed as a sad, tragic, everyone, there was only one grave sort of a situation. So
I can't believe they didn't just activate their gay force field. Everyone knows that like we have those.
That's how I survived the Kaikoura earthquake, you know.
Exactly.
That's how I got through all of the Christchurch ones. It's like the problems clown.
The what?
But it wasn't a reference to that.
Anyway, the Problems Clan is going to be the antagonist of my next game.
Okay.
Beautiful. I'm so looking forward to it.
I wanna be in where you can date both the chivalric wife and the Problems Clan. Can you hook me up?
I can probably make it happen at some point.
Thank you.
That'd be beautiful.
I feel like those are two underserved audiences, and really combining those two things, you know, chivalric wife and Problems Clan in the same game, I'm sure that the crossover there is huge.
I think there's a
No
really...
one's making games for the clown lovers.
Oh, I bet you there are games out there for the clown lovers.
Oh no.
There is. There is a visual novel that came out last year
would have an answer to this.
dating a pizza
Of course
clown.
you would know this, yeah.
A pizza clown! Yeah!
Does he deliver pizza?
I don't know. I just know that it's called like Deep Dish Piero or something.
Oh, I heard about
Sounds...
Oh my god.
The way that like all of our eyes just like lit up in unison the second you said that, like I feel like the sleeper cell has been activated. Don't mind me, I'm just opening a tab here.
Just gonna play this in the background while we talk. Usually gasp for joy.
No. Yeah.
Do you have any normal questions, Josh?
Yeah.
What?
Otherwise,
Define normal.
Otherwise, we're happy to just keep going.
For hours. Yeah.
Yeah, not much if you want normal questions.
questions though.
That's okay. We can do strange questions. Maybe like paranormal.
Yeah.
Still waiting for the chat to
Yeah.
pop up. Yeah. I guess what would be your advice for any up and coming game developer that wants to make a queer game?
Don't be in games.
Apart from that.
Ooh.
Um,
Sad.
I mean, it's sound and healthy advice.
For making a queer game, okay. My biggest advice, honestly, is just make something. If this is your first game, make something very small.
Oh. And
Like
then make
my
it even
biggest advice to
smaller than
anyone.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, take how small it is and then make it smaller. Even if you want to like do like amazing queer stuff in it, which is like do that, but also make it small. Make your first game, make it very small, and then from there you can make a bigger, queerer game. That's my biggest advice. Also, like finding like other games, like looking on itch.io or for like other games, and maybe trying to find people through that to like talk to other people and like look on Twitter, because there's a lot of other queer devs who like to help each other out and to give each other advice. You can build a really nice network through that. But yeah, if you're trying to make like your first game or something, make a small game.
Think of it like the sad 6-word story, but instead of baby shoes never worn, it's like there were 2 guys and they kissed or whatever.
Yeah.
Bigger game never made.
Yeah, bigger game never made.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Just make a fine game that's just like you're like kiss the man or don't kiss the man. And you click kiss the man. It's like yeah, you're gay. If you don't kiss the man, it's like cool, good for you.
Don't play that game. This sounds
That sounds really affirming to me.
I want to make things
just-
all
You can just repeat it and you can be like,
ideas.
kiss again? Don't kiss again.
Just like remake
I
Windows
can-
95 Solitaire, but if you win it, you get a pop-up that says "Congrats, you're gay." That's all you need.
I play that, but I suck at
It's
I suck at
true.
solitaire.
Yeah, I was gonna say you would
Yeah.
never, you'd never get it. But like in all seriousness, I think anytime you want to write a game or write a story or make a comic or write an article about any group of people that you don't belong to, like the best advice I can give is to just like don't treat them like an alien population. Like don't treat them like you're Charles Darwin, like tootling around on the ocean observing the finches. Like just talk to people like they're people and get a sense of what they're like, and let them finish your thing and play your thing and read your thing, and then like listen honestly and with an open mind to any feedback they give you that might be critical or might be even remotely less than 100% supportive. Because like if someone is giving you feedback on something you've made from a position of like this is for the record, this is something that I'm bringing into this conversation from my background in fiction and comics. One of the things that I see a lot of is people hiring sensitivity readers and getting a whole bunch of notes on like the thing that they have specifically asked for feedback on, and then just being like, my sensitivity reader was so mean about my book. And it's like, dude, you're paying this lady for her expertise. Like, don't ignore the people that you claim to be trying to represent in your project if they come back to you and say, hey, maybe you might need to change some things. Just accept that the feedback is coming from a place of wanting to make your work better because they care about it and because they care about the time invested and they care about the representation.
And that's also like advice that's good for queer stuff, but it's also very good just for working in game dev in general if you're new to it, because game dev is very much a feedback based thing because it's interactive for the players. So if you don't like, if you're not able to take advice from people, especially with some well-meaning advice for like representation issues, you are gonna struggle a bit. So learning to like step back and see, like, have empathy and how people are regarding your work, I guess, if that makes sense. Like basically being able to like see kind of what they see, even if you can't entirely see it. Especially if you want to work in something like narrative design or something, you really need to learn how to do that.
Oh, I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
I am gonna go a step further on that and say that if you're in a position to choose who you're working with, try and work with like a variety of people. The only thing better than getting like feedback from others who share perspectives different to your own on your work is just straight up working with them from the get-go. It's gonna make you a lot stronger. It's gonna make sure that you're like bringing like interesting creative ideas to the fore that you wouldn't have thought of on your own, and it's gonna like mean that you don't run into those issues later down the line because you've had people right there at the table at the beginning who, when you say something stupid, say, don't do that, that's stupid. And then also like in those sorts of scenarios, you know, if you do, like if you end up on a project that you, where you're sort of together with people who you don't work well with, also having like the grace to recognize that it's just that you're not very compatible, and making sure that like you still respect their opinions and take on board like whatever it is that they're saying, because if you stick your head in the ground like in whatever respect, it's only gonna sort of weaken your work. And in like a really collaborative industry like this, and in a really small industry like this that we were saying earlier, you know, the best thing to do is like try and make sure that you are approaching everyone with empathy and sort of taking advantage of the fact that there are so many people who want to be collaborating and making interesting things together.
Yeah, your games will be better off for it too.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I don't have much advice to give on this particular question. But I think, yeah, just having an open and honest conversation with your community and the people you're actually making your games for is really beneficial.
True. Yeah, I saw from the chat that people were trying to ask questions, but I believe someone can't see it. Can you guys check your social media if someone's been asking questions?
Our social media?
Yeah.
I can see the Twitch chat.
Yeah, because someone's also asking on Twitch chat as well, but...
Okay. Actually, this is a good question. I don't use Twitch very often. If I pause the video, will the chat still go along?
Yeah. If you pause the video, it's going to be
independent.
Sense. Yeah.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It'd be weird if it was something different.
Oh no, now there's a fire truck outside my house.
Oh,
you're having a wild time.
Yeah, street races and
downtown living, babies.
That's King Street, I guess, though, isn't it? Like that area. Yeah.
Yeah, like the combination of like the building I live in is on an intersection of like Cuba Street and a busy pedestrian pathway, and it's an older building with like really thin windows, and I overhear some wild shit.
I can imagine.
I can imagine too.
Yeah, I used to live at the top of K Road. That was
Oh wow.
Yep.
Exactly. Very similar.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, I lived in like the equivalent bit of Christchurch, and one time I had like a whole bunch of drunk people climb on my roof at 2 a.m. and I had a skylight, so.
Wow.
That's fun.
Goodness, that's terrifying.
It was.
Yeah.
So I can't remember what question we're on anymore.
Yeah.
I had a look at a couple channels and I don't see any questions directed at me, so they might mean
Twitch.
Is there like a Facebook chat or something as well? Like there's all sorts of...
Is there a YouTube chat? Is it on YouTube? I don't know.
True, I haven't checked YouTube.
So many options.
So many options, indeed.
But I think, if you're sort of a student or someone just sort of breaking into the industry, definitely make a Twitter account. Like that's sort of where the biggest sort of connections and community lies, and that's sort of any sort of where I've gotten the biggest opportunities over the years too. any sort of person talking about my game in a journalistic sense or any sort of speaker opportunities have purely come through Twitter, like almost 100%.
Yeah, most of my stuff's come through Twitter as well.
So even though it can be a bit of a strange and like toxic place at times.
At times, yeah.
It is also like where the sort of biggest like collection of game developers are, especially globally.
Twitter is a cesspool, but it's our cesspool.
Yeah, that's always fascinated me when I started going to the game dev industry, and that a lot of people are on Twitter more often than not. Because when I first started into community, I just went through Facebook groups and Meetup.com, and that's how I stumbled my way there. Yet for somehow Twitter's like the most active one when it comes to going through not just national level but also into international people as well.
It is, and it's almost a shame because it's almost like I used to be a part of a whole bunch of game forums back in the day that were all sort of like really beautiful small places, and they've all sort of sadly died away in like over the last 5 years. And Twitter really does feel like the only one that's left outside of a few sort of main Discord or Slack sort of alternatives.
Yeah, like as a community manager, I actually have a theory about this. I think it's because Twitter is like one of the last, if not the last, major social media platform that has not forced some sort of non-chronological timeline on all of its users. Even though they keep trying to, you can still sort by latest tweets on Twitter. Whereas, like, the reason why I found Facebook and Facebook groups impossible to use is because, like, you never see posts in order. You'll sometimes see stuff, like, weeks after it's posted, and it's not really possible to search for things, and it's not really possible to just get, like, a clear linear view of, like, the stuff that people are saying. And you're absolutely right, Demi. Like every single day of my life, I mourn the loss of the forum as a big online platform. It's just I use social media a lot. Obviously, like I run social media accounts for a living. I have run social media accounts that have dozens of thousands of followers, and like it shouldn't be this hard to just like give people information in a chronological way that's also easy to search. Like those seem like two features that should be really basic, but pretty much every major social media app is just like trying to find some sort of like perfect algorithmically driven timeline scenario. And like, if you are a person who is using these platforms to look for things like jobs or opportunities for commissions or people to work with or like any sort of like pertinent time sensitive information, it's brutal. It sucks.
Yeah, it really does. And yeah, it's really hard to like get people to engage with your things on other social medias.
It is, yeah.
It is.
And
I think that so Twitter has kind of like a throwaway quality to it that a lot of the other platforms don't, in part because it's like not as sort of based on images and that sort of thing. So because people are used to on their own pages like throwing off pretty pithy or pointless tweets, responding to other people in kind is pretty naturalistic. And then there's also the fact that Twitter is like the most anonymous of them still, and also text-based, and like anonymous text-based communication was much the foundation of like games culture and games interactivity, social interactivity rather. So defaulting to the platform that allows that feels pretty natural for games as a medium and a community.
Yeah, it takes a lot more work to write a forum post than it does to send a tweet.
Yes.
Not if you forum post like me.
I mean,
just like single words.
But some people put a lot of work into their forum posts.
Thinking about those forums where they would have like word count limits where you had to post like a minimum of
Oh my
50
gosh.
words or something, or your post would be
Oh.
considered, you
Minimum.
know,
Whenever I
low
watched
quality.
one of those, I was
Horrifying.
like, nah, it's not happening.
If your tweet is less than 140 characters, we won't allow you to post it.
I would just start every tweet with like, with like 100 H's.
No, create a forum signature.
Yeah, it's like perfectly emulating how I speak. Well.
So,
Mm.
yeah, it is a shame. I think, well, I mean, Twitter is very much my main forum for interacting with sort of a wider community. I know there's a sort of a lot of Slack and Discord channels as well.
Mm.
But for myself personally, I hate Slack and Discord. I find it really anxiety-inducing for some reason.
Same. Me too.
As soon as there's more than 4 people having a conversation, I'm out. I'm like, okay, I'm never coming back here again.
Ah.
I love it on Discord when it comes up that everyone is typing. That's how I know I've
Oh my
said something
gosh.
really bad.
That was
Yeah.
that's always hilarious.
Yeah, it's. I find it quite interesting how one of the things that people really championed about the coming of like wide platform social media is that things like open platforms, public accounts, and hashtags were supposed to like open up the conversation so that everyone everywhere could discuss everything at the same time, and then like we all discovered that's awful. And
That actually
so
sucks.
we've sort of like siloed ourselves back into these communities on like Slacks and Discords where like people, especially queer people, have realized that like there's actually a lot of value in having private, smaller communities to discuss things where like you're not necessarily bearing your thoughts to the entirety of planet Earth every time you share something.
Yeah, and I
You're
think that that Discord in particular, like the way that all of the channels and things are set up, really captures like a lot of what I enjoyed about like old LiveJournal of all things.
Yeah.
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 Just like
I'm not ashamed to
being
say
able
that I miss LiveJournal. LiveJournal was a great blogging
Oh.
platform.
It was
Like,
It was really
beautiful.
was
good.
brilliant.
Oh, wow.
Josh, your face is saying a lot right now.
I know. I'm like,
Emotions were just
I
cross
feel out of place because I don't know what LiveJournal is.
paths. That's okay. I think it was a very particular point in time. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was of an era, and unless you got really into it, it didn't last for very long either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of like local support, thankfully in New Zealand we have a lot of meetups, sort of scattered throughout every major city. I feel like, and I would definitely recommend, like, if you're a student or you're just sort of beginning your own personal like game dev journey, definitely attend those and sort of meet other people and sort of, you know, even if you don't have anything to show or discuss at that point in time for yourself personally. I think it's just a really lovely opportunity to get to know other people and sort of build up a small support network, especially for those game dev moments when you just sort of 3 months into something and nothing is working and it's all horrible, and you want to cry all the time. Having that kind of support network is really beneficial.
Having other people who understand the pain. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Like, no one outside of my game dev life understands the suffering I put myself through willingly. I'm like, Demi, you've been
started
crying
about,
at your
like,
desk.
branching paths and variables, and they're like, why don't you just write
I
a
don't
normal
understand.
screenplay?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I'll spend 60 hours, well, not that much, but you know, like 50 hours in a week and get nothing done and be like, okay, good. I want to cry about this and no one in my life understands.
But now you've got us and we understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of smaller private groups, there was one question here on Twitch asking, what resources that you have found useful for navigating the game dev space? I'm assuming it's not just on a social aspect, but also probably in a technical standpoint. Hmm.
Yeah,
I feel like I came into game dev so long
that's
ago
a
that
really good
maybe
question.
my experience is really relevant.
Hmm.
It's interesting because most of the roles that I work in are either so small that we're just working in like you know, a Python compiler with notepad tabs of your choice and like Microsoft Excel. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's like Wizards of the Coast where you have to install 6 types of proprietary software to even log into their VPN. And so like I don't actually have a whole lot of resources that I can think of kind of in the middle there. That's a really interesting question. But one of the things I guess I can talk about is if you do not know something like that, if you say want to start a type of project, you have an idea to make, let's say, a visual novel, and you have never made a visual novel before, you've just played a few and you've said, oh, that looks really cool. Like, I would love to make something like that. One of the coolest things about kind of our local community here in New Zealand is that, like, anytime I have ever found a thing that I've really liked, I've just reached out to the person and made it, and I've said, hey, like, I really loved how you did this. Like, if you have the time and I'm not like pestering you incessantly, like, could care to tell me how you made that. And people have responded really well to that. Like, even if someone doesn't necessarily have the time to run me through it, they'll like send me a hyperlink that's like, yeah, this is the company that made the software that I used to make the thing. And yeah, I've found that if you have an idea of what your goals are and what you want to do, just ask people who have made something like the thing you want to make, and you can probably get some really good information on where to start. And most people have been honestly really lovely and really welcoming. One of the things that I've
Yeah,
been
a
doing.
lot of devs are
Oh,
excited
go ahead.
about sharing their knowledge. A lot of devs like to share what they're doing and their knowledge and stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah, just reach out to people and ask them. Yeah. I think you'll find a lot of people willing to help.
And also, like, if people are excited about something they've made, then honestly, they'll probably love a chance to like gush about it. Like, people love getting asked
Yeah.
questions about their projects that they're excited for, and people love talking about stuff that they're excited to make and excited to work on. Like, one of the things that I'm absolutely dying about with that project that I mentioned earlier, where everyone dies, is like, I really wish I could tell you guys more about it, because there's a lot of things about it that I'm super excited about. And if any person ever came up to me and was like, oh, how did you do that thing? Or like, who did you talk to get a job writing on that thing? I would never shut up about it, like, once the NDA had expired. Hello, if you're watching me through my VPN, like, don't mind me.
True. But yeah, going back to the community side of things, what are the best resources when it comes to getting into the game dev space apart from Twitter?
Going to events.
Yeah,
Is
and
really
I feel
helpful.
like that's a bit, well, April, there are a couple happening in April, right? Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, Games Fair.
And the Game Fest,
Yeah.
yeah, that's one of them, and Play by Play.
Yeah, just go to those. So the upshot of going to those events is there will usually be stuff happening around them and afterwards where you can just like socially spend time with people, and that is way more important to finding like people who you think would be good to work with than like any of the more sort of remote forms of socializing. So I think that, like, especially if you're looking for either collaborators or people who you can rely on for like more sort of emotional kinds of support or like abstract stuff like this isn't working, someone stare at this with me, that's going to be the best place to do that. Most of the people who I talk to regularly in games are people who I've met at events. So.
Yeah, same. And it doesn't necessarily have to be events like Play by Play or Games Fest and NCGDC and stuff. They're really valuable. For like there's knowledge to access in the talks and stuff, and there's also a lot of people around. And even like if you don't go to the event itself, like Matt said, the other social stuff around it is always like really good. But even then, like there's usually like little meetups in the towns, and if there aren't, and you feel so inclined, you can always try and start with them. Because people are generally pretty willing to go hang out with other people in game dev.
Yeah, even something as simple as like, I will be at this, cafe at midday on this on like the day after the conference can be pretty effective.
Yeah, I've ended up running into a bunch of people by doing stuff like that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is like the classic example of that, at GDC in America, there's this phenomenon where people exclusively go to San Francisco to hang out in the park next to GDC.
I love that park.
Yeah,
I spent like all my time there.
You can't afford passes for the actual event, just go and sit in the park, because everyone at some point gets sick of being in the convention center and goes out to the park. So even if you're just in the park and never set foot inside the event, it's still like a way of making use of that week.
And people do
That's
like
really
mini talks and stuff in the park as like accessible things. Like people like to put on little events in the park. So yeah, there's always like people who are who want to do stuff outside of the conferences and stuff because they get boring.
Yeah, I think our audio guy DJ'd a set in the park one year.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. But yeah, I think oh my gosh, you're so right about the park. Like, I think...
Yeah, you mentioned the park, we're like, oh, the park.
But like...
No, truly, so there's, at GDC, there's sort of the big convention hall where they have a bunch of stands and people doing things. It's all very loud and crazy, and I never went there. And then you have the people doing their conference talks, and that's quite nice to sort of listen into. But I think in terms of personal relationships and connections I've made in the industry, like, the majority of them came from just being in the park and being around others, and just sort of unwinding and talking and sort of hanging out. I think that kind of networking is really beneficial. No, sorry, go ahead.
The park is kind of like a metaphor, because every conference will have its own equivalent of the park. You just have to figure out what it is.
Yeah.
So like Melbourne Games Week,
and if you ask
just
people
hanging out outside by the river, so the river becomes the version of the park. So you figure out what the park is for your given venue, and that's where you should probably stick around if you want to just meet people more casually that you can do stuff with.
Yeah, and you can just like ask people if you see them like going somewhere or whatever. Just like out, say hello. Yeah, like a lot of friends I've made through game dev at events has been like either them just coming up to me and talking to me, or me going up to them and talking to them, because like neither of us have anyone to talk to. It's like, what are you doing games? Like, oh, right. And they're like, what are you doing games? Like, oh, I do audio, and you start talking from there. Because we all have the uniting thing if we all like games, so we've got that as a base.
Can I be naughty and plug an event that my company is sponsoring?
Please do.
No.
Please do.
sorry, Saf. The democracy has spoken. You have been outvoted. There is actually going to be a queer gamer lounge at NZGF this year. Joypad and Dinosaur Polo Club are very, very excited to be sponsoring it. Nice. We were trying to get it up and off the ground last year, but obviously things happened and that didn't work out. But yeah, it's going to be a really rad place to just kick back and meet other queer game players or game developers. It will be a no photos space for at least part of the space. So if you are not out yet, or if you have any identity related concerns, you don't have to worry about that. So yeah, we would be, thrilled to have you if you are a person here who is watching this, who has never made a game before in your life, but you just want to meet some people who do and play some games with some people who do. Like, we would be stoked.
That's so nice.
That's so nice.
Plus, then you can tell people like, "Come on down to the joypad," and that sounds, I don't know. It
The
just sounds
joypad
like
is the new version
really
of the park.
a really intriguing way to invite someone to enjoy some fine video gaming.
Okay. Yeah. Here's another question from Twitch. Do you think there's danger of being a token queer who ends up being asked to do two jobs, like consulting on top of your dev work?
That's always a danger with like any minority thing.
Okay.
Yeah, especially like if you are in a studio and you decide to take on the challenge of like, oh, gonna make more diversity happen, or I'm gonna make sure there's more queerness. If you start doing it, generally people will just expect you to do it, and so it kind of just becomes default. Which is always a thing to be aware of, queerness or not. Like you can also do that as a woman or like as a disabled person.
It's like the tragic burden of being the first person to vocally give a shit.
Yeah.
Definitely like this sort of broader scale as well. I think kind of from the get-go, you kind of need to decide whether you want to be that person or not, because once you've stuck your hand up for it once, as Saf says, like the expectation is that you're just going to kind of keep doing it. So like in my case, with like my game dev stuff, I kind of sat down and said like, yeah, I'm cool with being pigeonholed as being the queer one, and so now as a result, like all of the opportunities that I get relate to that. Like I'm looking at getting a publisher for my next game, and the kind of publishers that I've been able to strike it up with, like I'm really happy that I have the opportunity, but they specifically relate to the fact that I am making queer games, and the expectation is, and luckily it's what I was planning to do in this case, that I will continue to do that. So yeah, you like when you make that decision, you are flipping a domino, and it will lead somewhere, and hopefully it's somewhere you want it to go, but you have to kind of be aware of it when you set out in that way. And also I think like the knock-on consequences of that depend on like in what capacity you sort of put your hands up to be the queer person, assuming that you don't have others around you to like spread the tokenizing factor out. Because there's a difference between like, you know, putting your hand up in a team of 10 people and being the one who's like, yeah, I think that our game should have the gay stuff in it, versus being someone who puts their hand up for panels like this or gives talks at like NZGBC or whatever on representation as a subject, which is stuff that I have done. As a result, that's just kind of part of like my brand, so to speak, now. So like that is always inextricably, unless I tried like very hard for many years, which I don't really want to do, to like try and decouple the two things. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever do that for myself either, but I'm okay with that.
In like academia, I'm actually making a conscious effort to like not be sort of associated with queer stuff. Like I'm trying to keep that as my sort of zone where I'm doing like I have like other research areas. I like haven't written anything on the subject yet, and it's going to be interesting to see like how well that barrier stays up, and like how much just being out in, you know, game studies, whether that like inevitably leads to something or not.
Because like you're always gonna have people show up and be like, oh, what do you mean you're studying something other than gender studies or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's just like it's such a rough stereotype to shed. I have a friend who is an astrophysicist of all professions, and people will meet her and they'll be like, oh, okay, so you're here and you're trans and you must be here for like a gender thing, right? And she's like, no, I'm here because I work on the telescope. And it's just like, there is this kind of inextricable association And it used to be like, oh, you must be doing women's studies. So at least now we can say that it's gender studies and it's a little bit broader and more inclusive. But, you know, there's just... Yeah, there's definitely some downsides to attaching your professional identity to any sort of work that you do to champion a cause or a field. You will always end up being that person that's like, oh, you're the climate guy, and I long for a future where we can all be more than one kind of guy. Like, just imagine.
Yeah.
I would love to be multiple guys.
Same.
Yeah.
I think that I've
many
managed
guys,
to.
one jumpsuit.
I tried to like keep my. I've tried to diversify my guy type portfolio, so there are 3 things that I try and be.
Yeah.
That type.
Three guys in a trench coat.
Yep.
I think I do
space
succeed
stuff,
slightly
bird stuff,
because
and
I have
Dracula stuff.
Yeah, I think I've got like Star Wars, game dev, and then podcasting. I think of my 3 things, so I have slightly diversified.
Okay.
But to be fair, most people meet me and they're like, "Oh, you're the Star Wars girl," so it hasn't worked that well.
I don't even know what people would say if they met me.
I still like, yeah, the hockey lady.
Yeah.
Like,
possibly less flatteringly, I'm like, oh, Casey, the swamp lady.
yeah.
I mean, those are both
for.
extremely valid.
No, I don't know what people define me as. I can barely define myself most days.
Same.
But I think, yeah, not pigeonholing yourself into a particular identity is really healthy. And not allowing others to do that to you.
And actually, one thing that you can do to kind of stand up for yourself in that regard, if you're worried about being pigeonholed, or if you see people pigeonholing you, is that if you get invited to speak at an event, or if you get invited onto any panels, or if you get invited onto any working groups, and they invite you in your capacity as a queer person, you can actually just say to them, cool, I will do this, I will participate in your event, but I am not only going to show up on panels about diversity. And that is a really powerful card you can play anytime anyone is asking you to just sort of show up and be like, we just want to prove we have a minority here. Like, because that is often what that move is that organizations will pull. And I have a lot of friends, for example, who work in literature, especially back in the US and Canada, who are Black. And they often get invited onto panels about slavery and about Black literature. And then they never get asked to talk about spaceships or fantasy novels. They never get asked to talk about world building. They never get asked to talk about the Age of Sail. They never get asked to talk about like all the shit that's actually in their books, because people will assume that authors who fit a certain profile only want to discuss things that fit our predisposed notions about what that profile is into. And it's tough, it's hard, it's actually really difficult to speak to an organization that is giving you their time and their space. And you kind of have to weigh whether it's worth potentially being disinvited from the event if they're the sorts of people who would, you know, take unkindly to that. But yeah, you do often have to speak up and say, you know, I'm happy to participate in this, but I won't just be participating in a representational capacity.
Yeah, Casey's totally right there.
I think that was beautifully put. Yeah.
It was beautifully put, yeah. Yeah, I'm checking the chat right now. That's one of the last questions I can see. Yeah, that's one of the last questions I can see. Alright. Yeah, I think we've answered all the questions I had when it comes to the panel. So
Yeah,
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah,
So
and
who are your favorite clowns, everyone?
yeah.
Ooh,
Ooh.
that's a really good question and very relevant to what we're talking
Yeah.
about.
Like actual clowns or fictional clowns or
I think either.
Any clown.
There was a lovely little game that came out a few years ago called Dropsy that I
Aw.
never
Oh
played.
yeah, I remember
I
Dropsy.
think that might be my favorite.
Dropsy was so sweet.
I never
I
actually
hate-
played it, but I did watch the trailer, which almost counts.
hmm.
I hate to
I
be the
played
Star Wars
Dropsy when
person.
Oh no.
My favorite clown is Jar Jar Binks because
Oh,
he's a clown in the expanded universe, or
Mm.
the orphanage.
you see, that's very sweet. That's very
He's the,
redeeming.
the clown for the kids on the
Oh no, I
orphanage on
can't
the
Aw.
possibly hate him. I only have love for Jar Jar Binks and watch
I
him in
literally
every
have, like-
movie going
Mm.
forwards.
Every single like non-cursed clown has fled my brain. No longer.
You can do a cursed clown,
No,
like
I
the
can't.
lovely clown, the lovely clown from It.
Pennywise would be
I'm
my
a big
Pennywise.
fan of the realistically flesh-like Mr. Mime from Detective Pikachu.
Oh my gosh, he was amazing.
Just if we're
He was
if we're
amazing,
going
yeah.
for like maximum cursed clown
Oh, I
territory.
hate that clown.
That was,
I hate
yeah,
that
was
clown.
true something.
God.
Did I fly too close to the sun?
No, it's
Oh,
A
okay.
little
I
bit.
thought
It was
of-
just
I
sort of
thought
the
of a
flesh
good
tone of his
clown.
character.
Oh no, man's
Yeah.
review.
There is an old game called Chrono Cross,
Oh, I
Mhm.
and
hate it.
Chrono Cross has a really cute clown girl called Harley, and
Yeah.
Harley turns into a dragon. So
Aw.
you know, it's two things for the price of one. You get a good clown, and you get a good dragon.
Mm.
I love a clown and I
And
love a
like
dragon.
one of the amazing things about her too is like despite the fact that the sprite art is, you know, of its era, you would always get these like incredible intricate cosplays of like her outfit, and people would just absolutely go to town with like the level of clown detail that was like absolutely not rendered in the game ever.
There
Hmm.
was official art
Oh, really?
of
That's always my
Ah.
favorite
of
thing.
like yes, and there was quite a lot of her because she was one of the like couple of main characters. So I briefly contemplated cosplaying her at one point when I was a teenager. So
Ooh.
That does not surprise me at all.
just a cute little fun girl.
Yeah. For my favorite clown would be Mr. Mime is definitely one, but definitely more leaning towards Kefka, I believe his name was, from Final Fantasy
Yeah.
VI.
Oh,
I knew
he
someone
had
would say him.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah, he had such a
fun.
great laugh, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A wonderful cackle.
Yeah.
he's a pretty good clown.
He is a pretty good clown.
So no one here is brave enough to say Jared Leto Joker.
I'm not gonna
Oh,
say brave.
no.
That's,
I
that's
don't,
not.
brave is not the word I would use. No.
No.
Foolhardy.
It's okay. It's
Career
okay.
ending.
I already know that you're all cowards.
Yes.
All right.
That makes me a
I'll go
coward
for
to not
it.
like it.
I'll go for it and say Bruce Timm's Harley Quinn.
Hmm.
I think that. I'm not
Okay.
gonna argue with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pro tier clown.
Hmm. Yeah, plus didn't Jared Leto's Joker come into Zack Snyder's Justice League a
Oh
couple
yeah,
days
he's in
ago?
it now. Yeah,
Yeah, he's
Oh,
in
is
it
he
now.
really? Oh,
he's in it now.
I haven't
So you
seen
got
the
that to look
original
forward to
film
as
and
well.
Hmm.
The 4-hour
gonna
movie
watch
is gonna
this.
be fun.
Is it
Oh god, it's 4
4
hours.
4 hours. 4 hours.
That's too much. That's too many hours. That's like too
It's
many
okay.
hours.
I'm gonna be too busy watching Jared Leto play Morbius, the living vampire.
Yeah.
The superior.
Superior Charity, no.
It's a better
no.
it's a better entrance into the Leto cinematic universe to start with Morbius.
Cinematic
Yeah.
universe.
You know,
Now I'm just thinking about my favorite Leto character, and it's just such a dark road.
I mean,
And I don't
mine
want
is
to.
just mine is just by default his one in Blade Runner 2049 because I don't care about him anything else, and he's in that movie.
Oh, that's right, he was in that movie.
So by default, that's my
He just
favorite.
kind of played himself, I feel like.
Yeah, he just played
That's
like
how I
himself,
imagine
but
him
as
to
a CEO, I think.
Mm.
Totally talking about queer games.
Look, I'm sure that someone will have gotten something like revelatory and important from this discussion.
I hope so. I really
Hmm.
hope so.
Definitely, definitely.
And like, I feel like speaking of people that like when we were talking about like, I don't know, you can reach out to people and ask them about stuff. Like, I feel like we are also people that you can do that with.
Hmm.
Ooh, we've actually got a really great question come up in chat since Clown Chat started.
Hmm.
This is a really, really good one, actually.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to try to not butcher the pronunciation of your name. Pargile, or is it Pargile, asks, how do you manage the line between safe spaces and cliques, especially in New Zealand? Because of course New Zealand is very small. That is a fantastic question, and I'm actually really glad someone asked it because queer spaces in particular, everywhere that I have ever lived, even not in New Zealand, have run the risk of becoming extremely cliquish and elitist and exclusionary. It is a problem. It's just what happens anytime you have a smaller group of people that kind of situate themselves away from the larger group, be it in a professional context or a fan context or, I don't know, high school drama club or like literally anywhere.
Yeah. I don't really know how to prevent it, but one thing that I do personally is, like, when I was organizing things as well as just like a person who goes to things, is I kind of go out of my way to hang out with people that aren't necessarily the people that I always talk to. Like, if there are any people, I'll go talk to them and hang out with them and like also connect them with other people. Like, I'll kind of go out of my way to make sure that other people are talking and that I'm talking to other people. So even if you're new at these kinds of events or like you're somewhat regular, just like reaching out to different people and getting to know them is always a good way to kind of combat that. Because it is easy to fall into like your little group of people, but if you make an effort to also know other people, it stops happening quite so badly. And even if like there is like a little group that ends up becoming tight and kind of away from everyone else, you can still kind of have your own little like network of people outside of that. Because as with, like, any clique cannot include anyone. Like, it can't include everyone. That's kind of the point of them. So like, there's like, you can make your own. That's cooler. Make a cooler clique.
Yeah, and I also think one of the easiest ways to prevent spaces that you are in, especially once you've been in a group or been in an industry a little bit longer, is to just always invite new people. Like, invite people that didn't go to the same school that you do, invite people who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds than you, invite people who aren't just your friends, invite people who aren't just your friends' friends. There is a real value to be had in almost any situation of having very different and varied and like truly diverse, not just like tick box on the census diverse perspectives in any given professional group. And the easiest way to make sure that other points of view are represented, the easiest way to make sure that people who aren't the dominant demographic are represented is to literally just invite them. And then once they are there and once they're a part of your group and once they are part of your events, support them. Don't just like invite people to a thing and then leave them there to sink or swim. Like, one of the things that I have heard is so frustrating about attending in-person events, especially as a New Zealander and especially overseas, is that you'll win like a scholarship spot or a sponsored ticket to GDC or whatever. and then you'll get there, and unless you have a group of people that you've gone there with, oftentimes people are just sort of turned loose without any sort of direction, without any sort of guidance. And I think it's really important for organizations to remember that just like physically putting people in a place is not enough. There needs to be continued support. And one of the things that I've focused on this year as a mentor for the IGDA Foundation is that kind of continued long-term mentorship and support and long-term communication, and just making sure that instead of just setting someone a place at the table, you're like actually engaging with them and inviting them back and making sure they feel continually valued and continually listened to, because it's just basically any sort of social group that's based on work has a tendency for people to seek out relationships only with people who can improve their standing in their work, or people who can contribute to projects they're working on. And it's really important to engage with people and support people who aren't that. I dare you, this is your homework for this panel. I dare you to be nice and support the work of someone who you aren't just trying to get a job with. Like, if everyone can just go out and do that with about 20 people, like, it would make such a difference.
It would make a huge difference. I've made a real effort in like the last year on getting to know people who like aren't necessarily in those like areas of like they're gonna give me a job or anything. Like, not that I haven't, like, that I've always been like, oh, I want to be friends with the person who could give me a job, because I'm not really like that. But
networking is important to do. Like, if you want to eventually be compensated with money for the work that you do, you'll have to do a certain amount of networking.
But I've always like tended to try and talk to everybody, not everybody, but like I'll talk to people I don't really know and stuff. Like, I've ended up talking to a lot of like new devs and students at events and stuff instead of like hanging out with the cool kids, because like whatever. Like, you can meet a lot better people, and you never know who's going to end up being your peer and who you'll end up working with in the future either way. And also, like, wouldn't you want people to do the same for you? And I've made such an effort to like make more connections with other people in game dev who aren't necessarily like up high or whatever, like other people who make like weird artsy games and stuff, and it's been really reassuring and like kind of like healing and wholesome to like build a network like that with people that you can trust and that you can talk to about games, but you don't necessarily like are trying to get them to like you because you want a job or anything.
By and large, my approach to like quote unquote networking in game dev has always been like with more interest in finding people who I can relate to and whose company I enjoy, rather than like who is going to be beneficial to know. And I think if you like keep an eye on things in terms of like, who am I as a person going to enjoy spending time with, rather than like, who am I as a professional going to like benefit from spending time with, that naturally tends to like make you less mercenary in your interactions with people, and also like
less miserable in general.
Yeah, I think that's really lovely.
And like also in terms of just like having an eye for what sort of things you are going to do with your time, like especially at, you know, stuff like New Zealand Games Festival or Melbourne Games Week, when you've got like a really stacked schedule of a million things happening at once, feeling more open to go to the thing that will be fun versus the thing that sounds like financially rewarding or whatever. I think helps a lot to sort of keep your mind open, and to make sure that you're meeting other people who are open-minded about who they spend time with. Because like if you go to those sort of things like the board game nights or the ice cream socials or whatever, the people who you are going to tend to run into at those ones are the ones that just want someone to talk to, rather than the people who are looking for like, you know, a great producer or investors or something like that. So though the spirit of an event will determine like what kind of people show up to it, and going to an event that's like supposed to be more sort of friendly and sociable is probably going to like set you up for running into people who have that sort of attitude too.
Yeah, I think it's such lovely advice. I think make friends, not connections. It's like a really nice way of going about it.
It really is. It really is. Considering that, from experience, it is actually much more better just have more personable connections rather than going on a professional capacity, or not just in a professional capacity. If that makes any sense. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is really important because ultimately, like, you want to enjoy your time with the people you with. You want to enjoy your time within the communities you form.
Mm.
Yeah, and a lot of my work stuff has ended up coming from like not necessarily my professional connections that I've made, but like personal connections.
Yeah.
Because people who like you and like know you're a good person, they'll fight for you
Mm.
in more ways than one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, like, if you are mostly sort of trying to get in with people in terms of clout or like for monetary reasons, then that sort of attitude tends to, like, you know, like brings like. Those aren't the sorts of connections that are going to support you if you are no longer beneficial for them to know. So, like,
It's a dangerous
also,
game to play.
yeah,
It
so
is.
also
Yeah.
keeping your mind open that if you do meet people who like turn you down because they've got their own like clique or are too wrapped up in their business or whatever, missing out on those connections might hurt in the moment, but a lot of the time it's going to mean that you've dodged a bullet because it's someone who is just going to keep on prioritizing their own, like, you know, their own business well-being basically over
Yeah.
like
Mm.
any sort of connection to you.
Yeah, those relationships, like, I mean, I've definitely had those where I've been like, oh, this person didn't like me, we didn't, like, click when we got coffee. And then, like, a year later been like, no, that's good, actually. I'm glad that didn't happen.
Mm.
I've
Yeah.
very directly had a couple of people who have, like, you know, turned me away from an event or told me not to do a thing or like otherwise sort of rebuffed me doing a thing, and then whatever I've done as the alternative has worked out better, even though at the time it felt like well, I couldn't do this, so I guess I'm getting dinner with this other person or going to this board game
Yeah.
night, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Indeed.
it's always like at a lot of events I've been to, I've been like, oh, I haven't been able to go to the event that all my friends are going to, but then you'll find one friend who's going to, like, I don't know, gonna get coffee or like dessert somewhere, and so you take along with them, and then you run to a bunch of other people, and you've got a bunch of really good friends. Like, maybe you'll be hanging out 3 a.m. in Denny's, and it's great. Do speak from experience with that one.
Yeah, that had a whiff of lived experience to it.
That was a
someone,
good night.
Someone
It was
on
a good
chat has
milkshake.
also, someone on chat has also asked if the panel wants to give out their social medias, just because I happen to have it still open. I guess we should probably do
Oh.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's smart.
Of course, hold on. My Twitter is @cuddlepunk with 2 U's.
Cuddle punk.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by 2
else?
U's?
Yeah, I did. 2
Cuddlepunk.
U's.
Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah.
Wait,
Someone
2
else
U's
was
in
following.
cuddle or 2 U's in punk?
True. There's so many U's.
Ah.
Okay, 2 U's and punk. Sorry.
Yeah, cuddle
Oh.
punk.
Yeah.
Ah.
And you can sort of find me there. Although I don't tweet about games that often.
I am Mad Max Fury Road on Twitter, but also
You
spelled
sure
in
are.
an artistic way. So it's Mad and then MACS Fury Road.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
My Twitter is super easy. It's just my name. I recently vanquished the person who had been sitting on my birth name's Twitter account since like 2007 or whatever.
Wow.
I have triumphed. Two entered and only one left, and so you can now find me on Twitter as just Casey, CASEY, Lucas, LUCAS, and I post about game stuff sometimes, but mostly I actually at the moment my feed is probably going to be full of novel stuff because I'm revising a novel at the moment, and lots of anime shit posting.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I am Wanderlustin, so Wanderlusting, but without the G. WANDERLUSTIN. I tweet about games sometimes. I tweet about Star Wars a lot. I'm also tweeting a lot about novel stuff because I'm also currently finishing off a novel. I don't know, I should post about a lot of things, but generally I like to talk to people about stuff on there more than anything else.
Oh, we're describing what we actually use our Twitter for? Mine.
Oh.
What do you
I mean, I
use
left
Twitter for,
a
Ted?
lot out of mine. I left a
There's
lot out
other
of
stuff.
mine. Maybe I should warn people. I don't know.
So
I mean, they'll get what they get.
I tweet abstractly about the game that I'm working on, but it hasn't been formally announced, so it's mostly like just vaguing.
Oh, I do the same. It's so good.
The void is normally filled by bad bird photography, shitposts
it's
about
wonderful.
Dracula, and currently at the moment a bit of tweeting about Transformers.
There it is. There it is.
I got really into reading the comics recently for reasons, so this is what she's signing up for at the moment. I made a separate containment Twitter that no to put up with it, and I'm not telling anyone what that one is.
The managed Transformers isolation quarantine zone. I tried to do the whole multiple account thing.
I've just revealed like the horrible subtext behind all of my train jokes prior to now.
Oh,
I see.
Is it that like really Toblerone shaped train? I love that train.
Oh, I just saw that recently.
It's a fake train, isn't it?
No, I think it's real. Is it not?
I hope it's real.
That'd be
I don't know.
so
I saw people in the
disappointing.
comments being like, "It's photoshopped," but I didn't look further into it because I want to believe.
I believe in the triangle train.
Yeah. On that note, I think that's about it for today's meetup. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you all so much for
hosting.
actually for being part of the panel, and thank you the watchers for watching and being entertained by all our clown stories. Yeah. Tune in next time for the next Game Dev Meetup, which will be in March. This time maybe it might be physical, depending if another lockdown might happen. Maybe, hopefully not. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and see you then. Take care.
Thanks to everyone for your
Yay,
lovely
thank you
discussions.
for
I
listening.
had a blast.
Yeah.
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 Me too.
Cool.
So